Hello and welcome everybody to today's episode of the JBA All In Podcast.
Our podcast is currently streaming on Podbean and YouTube. The JBA On Podcast is your one-stop sports shop podcast for news around the sports world.
My name is Jack,
My name is Brendan.
and we have a very stacked lineup of news and segments today, so let's jump right into it.
All right, it's time for the hot topic, everyone. The Kansas City Chiefs beat the Houston Texans a couple nights ago, 34-20, to wrap up the first game of the 2020 NFL season on Thursday night. We saw great performances around the board. Jack, what do you think of this first game of the 2020 NFL season? Any first impressions from the two teams? Anything you'd like to touch on? Just anything at all. What do you think of the limited fans in the Chiefs Stadium? Just anything at all. Anything you want to talk about this Thursday night game?
So that was a very entertaining game, and I think one thing that pops out immediately is Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who had 25 attempts for 138 yards and a touchdown. I did not think he was going to be this good. I always strayed away from him in fantasy. I didn't really trust his abilities, but now it's kind of sad to see that I didn't have him on any of my fantasy teams because he is a beast. He was breaking tackles out there, pulling off long runs, so he's going to be a stud for years to come. And, I think just watching the Chiefs, in the beginning they were a little rusty, but when they got when they were firing on all cylinders, the Texans had no chance. The Texans are a good team, but Deshaun Watson can't do everything. It really looks like he wants out of there. No, I think the Texans had a lot of potential the past few seasons, and then Bill O'Brien kind of messed that up. So I think if the Texans can't bounce back and bounce back strong, it's probably not going to look so good for them. But I think that was an amazing game. Finally, we get to watch football again, and, I'm just really excited to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm so pumped for football, man. And like you said, Edwards-Helaire, great performance in week one. I doubt him going into the season. I just think, a lot of people had him as, a top 5 back in fantasy, and I just, it's a rookie, just hard to trust. But, he was very, very good. Last game, he runs really low to the ground, and he's able, he's really small. He's only 5'7", but he can still break tackles well. So, I think that the Chiefs can keep him around. Like you said, he's going to be stud. But also, I do wonder, in terms of Damian Williams, will they get rid of him? Will they keep him around? We'll see. Will he want out to be a starting running back somewhere? Who knows? And then the Texans, obviously they lost DeAndre Hopkins with that terrible, terrible trade. And David Johnson, he had an okay game, 11 rushes for 77 yards and 1 touchdown. So his game was pretty good. It wasn't anything crazy special, but it was pretty good. But I still think that the loss of DeAndre Hopkins is going to cost them at least a win or two, which is why I think they'll go 9-7, 8-8 this year. They were 10-6 last year. So I think they're going to be up there with the Colts and Titans, kind of contending for that division. But I think they're going to end up losing it to either the Colts or the Texans. Colts or the Titans, excuse me. I think the Colts or the Titans will come out on top in that division. And then obviously Kansas City is a Super Bowl contender. If Clyde Edwards-Helaire really it turns into a top back, I think honestly this might be another Super Bowl trip for them. At least getting there. Who knows about winning it? My pick originally for the Super Bowl was the Saints. We'll see where it goes. I think halfway through the season, we will update our NFL predictions and we'll share them with you guys, and just based on new information, injuries or certain players breaking out, stuff like that. But overall, I think just a really good game for the Chiefs, and the Texans, they had a good game too. 20 points is not terrible, is not that bad. Deshaun Watson played a pretty good game. He had 253 yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception. But the only thing is that he did get sacked quite a bit. That's just how it is in Houston with their O-line situation. And then Brandon Cooks only had 2 receptions for 20 yards. We'll see if he can, somewhat replace DeAndre Hopkins. But right now, just based on the first game, it's only the first game, but just based on the first game, they're probably going to need to try to get him open more. But Will Fuller definitely had a good game, 8 receptions for 112 yards. So he had a great game. Hopefully he can stay healthy all season. He's struggled with that the last couple of years. So overall, just two good games for both of them, but the Chiefs kind of just later in the game, the Chiefs kind of took over, just kind of ran away with it. The Texans made one last push, but they weren't quite able to get there.
Yeah, and you were talking about Will Fuller, and I'm sorry to say, but I had Will Fuller on my main fantasy team, and I didn't start him. I was sitting there right before the game. I was watching right before kickoff, and I was like, okay, I won't start Will Fuller. I know I picked him as my fantasy football sleeper, but he can't have that big of a game. And of course, I think he scored, I think it was at least 20 fantasy points, which really hurts. But I think my choice as Will Fuller as a sleeper has been working out so far. I mean, obviously it's only the first game, but he had a pretty good game. I just think if if Deshaun Watson can stay healthy and just throw the ball, because that's pretty much all he's going to be doing with that O line, I think like you said, they're going to be contending. They're going to be like on the level of the Colts, or I think you said the Titans. Um, but I think this is going to be a down year for the Texans because nobody knows what Bill O'Brien is doing. I mean, David Johnson did have a good game, but it was just a questionable decision. I just don't know what's going on with the Texans, and I hope they can bounce back, but it's not looking so good for them. But yeah, it was a really entertaining game. I don't even think it matters who you're a fan of. You just had to like that game because it was the first football we've seen in a while. But I think it showed that there's more good things to come. Obviously, tomorrow is Sunday. We're gonna have a lot of good games. My Chargers are playing the Bengals. That's gonna be a good game. So I think just even if you are a Texas fan, you just have to be happy that football is back.
Yeah, NBA playoffs are cool. The MLB is cool. The NHL, yeah, like they're all great, but there's just a different vibe about the NFL that people get so hyped for. I think one of the main reasons is because they play less games, so each game matters. 16 games, it's like you lose one, you're upset, you're sad. You win one, you're ecstatic, because in the NBA, you lose one or you win one, it doesn't really matter because you still have another 80 plus games. And in the MLB, you still have over 100. You might have over 100 games left. So it's just, I think the way how the football schedule is shortened because obviously football is way more physical than any other sport. I think it just makes each game more hyped up and more important, and I really like that. All right, next topic. The MLB has released their postseason plan for the 2020 MLB postseason. Basically, what their plan is, so we already know that they're going to have an expanded playoff field. So the top two teams from each division will make it to the playoffs, plus the two next best teams record-wise will also make the playoffs as wild cards. That will be 8 teams per league in the playoffs. So they'll be seeded 1 through 8 in each league. So the 1 seed from the National League will play the 8 seed from the National League, 2 seed 7, 3 seed 6 seed, 4 seed 5 seed, except just like that in each league. And then they'll be played. It'll be best of 3 series, and whoever the hosting team is, the higher seed, the series will be played exclusively at their stadium. So whether it's 2 games or 3 games, all of them will be played at that home team stadium. Just they want to try to limit travel and everything with the COVID-19 virus. And then once they move into the MLB divisional round, they're going to implement a bubble system. So basically, teams from the NL will travel to Texas to play in the Houston Astros Stadium and the Texas Rangers Stadium. Teams from the AL will travel to Southern California to play in the Los Angeles Dodgers Stadium and the San Diego Padres Stadium. The reason why, the Padres and Dodgers obviously are both in the NL and the Astros and the Rangers are both in the AL. So they wanted to make the NL teams go to Texas because they didn't want, the Padres or something came in as a lower seed than the Dodgers, and then they end up playing at the Padres Stadium. That'd be unfair because the Padres know the park better, et cetera, et cetera. Something like that. They want to make sure that it's always a neutral ground for whoever's playing, and then the playoffs will continue as normal, just rotating between the stadiums. And then the final World Series game will be played in the Texas Rangers Stadium, their new stadium. So, Jack, what are your thoughts on the new plan for the MLB postseason? Do you like it? Do you not like it?
I personally think it's a good system. I like how pretty much the NL teams go to Texas and then the AL teams go to LA or SoCal. But I think it's a pretty good system. I don't really like how they're using the Astro Stadium because I feel like that's just being a little too nice to, the team that cheated the Dodgers out of a World Series. Luckily, they're not going to be getting that far in the playoffs. But it's a good system. I think it's a pretty good system. I think the MLB did a good job. I think maybe if they did like a bubble system a little earlier, like maybe the NBA, it would have been a little better. But it seems like they've been handling it well. Obviously, it's not perfect because I think a few teams have gone down with COVID-19. Not at the moment. I don't believe at the moment, but it was earlier. So it seems like everything is going to be fine. But the season's almost over. I'd say I think there's only around 20 games left, and there's 60 games in the season. So it's not really the final push yet, but it's going to be getting there soon. So teams are going to start really playing the best they can. But I think it's a good system. I think it's going to work out. I'm just excited to see who's going to be the final people in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it just fits under the current circumstances in the world right now. You know, obviously they'll probably go back to normal whenever they can go back to normal, hopefully next season. But just for now, I think this is the best and safest way to crown a champion. Next topic, Jadeveon Clowney signed with the Tennessee Titans a couple of days ago. The Tennessee Titans trying to bolster their front seven. Clowney was a free agent for a very long time. Teams like the Saints made a big push for him, but the Titans were always kind of interested in him, and then they finally were able to get a deal done. So, Jack, what are your thoughts on the Titans signing Jadeveon Clowney? How do you think this affects their defense and then their overall team success this season?
I think this is pretty big for the Titans. I wouldn't say slept on because they weren't the best team to begin with, but I think this makes them a better team. I know both of us didn't really think of the Titans as high as everyone else, but this really makes me think a little bit more about how good the Titans are going to do this season. I think it really brings them, or it really makes them a better team in general. And I really think that they will be able to contend with other teams in the AFC, especially the Colts. I had the Colts as a favorite to win that division, and I thought the Texans and the Titans would be battling out. But now I think that makes the Titans a little more competitive. And obviously, I still think the Colts are going to win. I personally think they're a better team, but it's going to be a little harder for the Colts to win. But I think it's going to be I think it's going to be a really interesting division to watch, a really fun division to watch, really against the Colts, Titans, and Texans. But this is really going to make things interesting. Instead of like the Colts having a lock, in my opinion, on the division, I think it's going to be a lot more competitive and it's going to be really fun to watch.
Yeah, I also think that a lot of people still have the Colts winning that division. It's definitely makes the Titans better, but Jadeveon Clowney, he wasn't that great last season. He only had 3 sacks in 13 games. So, I think he's got to pick it up this season. The Titans, they added Clowney, and but they also lost their best O lineman in Jack Conklin, and they also lost their best cornerback in Logan Ryan, their best D lineman Jarrell Casey in the offseason. So they've definitely lost a lot. And they were 9-7 last year. I feel like that's probably where they're going to be again this year because if you just look at the schedule, I feel like they could be in the 8-8 to 10-6 range. I think that's around where the Colts will be. I think I predict the Colts will be 10-6 because they have a crazy easy schedule this year. They have, barring injuries, they have no excuses to not make the playoffs this year. Maybe they can lose the division to the Titans. The Titans are a very good team. I could see them losing the division to the Titans if Philip Rivers doesn't play well. But barring like injuries to like Ty and Darius Leonard and Quentin Nelson, like if unless they're just crazy like injured all across the roster, more than last year because last year they had so many injuries. But it would have to be more than last year to have like a decent excuse to not make the playoffs this year. Their roster is way too good not to make the playoffs this year. If they're healthy, and even if Philip Rivers doesn't play that well, they say they're going to commit to running the ball. Their run game should be enough. If Jonathan Taylor is what we expect him to be, their run game should be enough to get them at least 8 wins, I feel like. So I think there's no excuses this year. They got to go all out going for the playoffs. I don't think they're going to really be I think they're a dark horse Super Bowl contender. It all depends on how Philip Rivers plays. If he can go back to somewhat of what he was in 2018, then I think they can be a dark horse. But if he's just kind of like average, last year he had a lot of interceptions thrown, but he also had a lot of great throws late in games, and he was always throwing all over the place late in games because he had to, because Chargers were always down late in games, and they lost a ton of close games. So I think that this year with one of the best alliance in the league, in my opinion, the best, instead of the Chargers, who last year with a bunch of injuries were the 31st ranked by Pro Football Focus, and then also a better defense. That last year the Chargers defense was riddled with injuries. So hopefully, in this year, the Colts defense, I think, will probably help out Philip Rivers a little more. There was a bunch of games that the Chargers lost because of their kicker or their defense, and then obviously Philip Rivers played a part in that. But I just think if he kind of needs to be a game manager for the Colts, kind of like Brissett was last year, but he needs to be a little bit better than that. He needs, as long as he's a somewhat of an upgrade over Brissett from last year, I feel like they can make the playoffs because their roster definitely got a lot better. But in terms of the Titans, I think that Jadeveon Clowney, like I said, 3 sacks in 13 games this year, is really good. And then, the Titans, they lost a lot of stuff. But I still think they're a very good team. I think Derrick Henry's going to, he's a great running back. They're going to hand it to him a lot. But in the playoffs last year, in their 2 playoff wins, they only threw the ball for over – in the 2 playoff wins, they threw for over 100 yards 0 times. That's just not going to work 16 games. So Ryan Tannehill, they gave him a huge contract too, and the only game where they did, they ended up losing. So I just don't think it's going to work in today's NFL for a full 16 games. So Ryan Tannehill really has to step it up this season. Live up to his big contract. This is kind of, yes, the Titans made the AFC Championship game last year. Who also made the AFC Championship game? The Jaguars did with Blake Bortles, and then the very next year they fell off and didn't make the playoffs. Also, the Mark Sanchez and the Jets made the AFC Championship and then fell off the next year. So hopefully that doesn't happen to the Titans this year. A lot of people want to see the Titans succeed. I don't think it's going to happen. I think they'll still make the playoffs as a wild card, but I just don't think they're going to be able to make the AFC Championship game again. Finally, for the hot topic, the Milwaukee Bucks were eliminated by the Miami Heat a couple of days ago. Huge upset. The Bucks were one of the favorites to win the NBA Finals, and the Heat came out and were up 3-0, and then they lost a close game to the Bucks, and they were only up 3-1, but then they just put them away in Game 5. So the Heat right now, I have a question, Jack. Do you think the Heat are a legit NBA Finals contender? Do you think if they were able to beat the Celtics, who beat the Raptors yesterday, if they were able to beat the Celtics, well, first of all, do you think they could beat the Celtics? And then if you do think that, do you think they could beat the Lakers or the Clippers, who are looking like the 2 teams that are going to come out of the West?
I personally think the Heat are real contenders, but you can't sleep on the Heat. They obviously beat the Bucks, but one thing is Giannis' performance and injury. Giannis is the MVP, but the MVP is a regular season award. His performance in that round against the Heat was just disappointing. He obviously got injured and missed the last game, but watching a player of that talent go down against the Heat, which I don't think anyone thought the Heat would beat the Bucks. And I don't think anyone saw the Heat even going this far, especially going past the Bucks. But, you can't sleep on them because obviously they did take down Giannis. But Giannis' performance was really disappointing. I think that was one of the causes of them losing. And I think this might affect where Giannis goes in free agency. He said he wants to stay with the Bucks, but you never know what's going to happen. Kyrie said he wanted to stay with the Celtics, ended up leaving. So you really just never know what's going to happen in free agency. But I think this affects it. But Giannis seems like a really loyal guy, so I don't know if he's going to leave. But I just don't think that he are contenders. I don't think they're going to be able to beat the Lakers or Clippers. But, they probably won't be talking much because no one thought the Heat could beat the Bucks, and I don't want to spoil or jinx anything because this is really the year of LA. One of our teams is going to go to the finals. I pretty much guarantee that. So it's just going to be really fun to watch, but I don't think they're contenders.
Yeah, like you said, year of LA Dodgers. I mean, Los Angeles has a lot of great sports teams right now. They got the Lakers, they got the Clippers, and they got the Dodgers and the MLB. They've got lots of great teams, just representing that city. And I think that one of those 3 I think that all 3 of those, I think in the NBA, it'll be an LA team winning. I think the MLB, the Dodgers will end up winning the championship. But we'll see. You never know what can happen. If the Rams are still good or still in Super Bowl contention, I think that it'd be so cool for LA to see that. But obviously the Rams had down season last year, they could potentially make a playoffs this year, but right now we're talking about the Heat. And the Heat, we were just talking about the Titans. Titans, they came in as they came in as a wild card. They beat a couple teams, and they ended up getting the conference championship, and they lost. And to get to the conference championship, they beat the number one team with the MVP. This kind of reminds me maybe of that. The Heat came in, beat two teams to get the AFC to get to the conference championship. In order to get to the conference championship, they had to beat the best team with the MVP. So I feel like this could be very similar to how the Titans were last year, where they went out in the conference championship, but you never know. Celtics, I think, are a very good team. They could potentially win it all. I think it'd be really cool to see a Lakers-Celtics championship. That's what I'm going to be rooting for, because if the Lakers were to win that, if the Lakers were to win it, they'd even it up all time in number of championship wins with 17 each. The Celtics, obviously 11 of those are from the Bill Russell days, and there are only 8 teams. But it still just would be really cool to see a Lakers-Celtics championship. I think that's what's going to happen. If I had to predict it right now, I'd say Lakers-Celtics. Obviously, it's what I want to happen. Also, it'd be really entertaining. It'd be a really, really hyped up NBA final series too. I think the NBA executives should also hope for that. I think because they probably get a lot of ratings. Everyone will want to watch that, especially if the game goes 7 games. That'd be an insane matchup. But on topic of the Heat, I definitely think that they could push the Celtics to 6 or 7 games, maybe even beat them. I just think that the Celtics they're kind of like the Bucks. They have Giannis and Chris Middleton, and the rest of their roster just kind of works well together. Overall, you could say that a team like the 76ers have a better roster in terms of talent than the Bucks. You could also say that as for the Heat. You could say it for the Celtics. Just and overall, I feel like the third best player on the Bucks is Eric Bledsoe, and I'd take Kyle Lowry over Eric Bledsoe, or I'd take there's lots of guys on other teams who could be a fourth or fifth best player who I'd take over Eric Bledsoe or George Hill or Brook Lopez. I think they've been working together well all season, and when Giannis kind of went down, wasn't playing well, it was tough for them. So I think but the Celtics, on the other hand, they work well together, like I said, but they're also loaded everywhere. They got Jason Tatum, they got Kemba Walker, they got Jaylen Brown. Marcus Smart is a first-team all-defense. They've got some great talent all around the roster. I feel like the Celtics and Heat, this could potentially be a deep, really well. I feel like if the Celtics can defend if they can keep the Heat from shooting the 3-ball well, which I think they definitely can, I think that they'll win the series, because one of the biggest strengths of the Heat was shooting the 3-ball. When I was watching the games they played against the Pacers, it felt like they made every single 3 that they took. So if the Celtics could stop them, from shooting the 3 efficiently, I think they'll definitely end up winning that series.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you pretty much summed it up all of it up.
All right, it's time for a new segment, Down to the Wire. Down to the Wire, we just kind of like talk and just highlight, a game that went down to the wire. And we'll also be putting highlights on YouTube over us talking, so you can, see what happened if you end up missing the game. But the Raptors and Celtics Game 6 was unbelievable. It was one of the craziest NBA playoff games I probably ever watched. So entertaining. The Raptors came up on top 125-122 to force the Game 7. They ended up losing in Game 7, but the game was so entertaining. It went to double overtime. It was unbelievable. I just can't even fathom how, I was watching out with some friends, and every time, and it felt like they were making every single shot they took. Both teams were just on fire. They couldn't, and a lot of the players, most of them played 50-plus minutes. It was insane. Pascal Siakam played 54 minutes. Fred VanVleet played 50 minutes. Kyle Lowry, 53. OG Anunoby, 49 minutes. And then on the Boston side of things, Jason Tatum had 51 minutes. Jaylen Brown, 51. Kemba Walker, 51. Marcus Smart, 49. Daniel Tice, 47. They played so many minutes, and yet they were still able to make shots efficiently. It was unbelievable. They were exhausted. Kyle Lowry, we saw him. He sat down. He had to catch a break. These guys played their hearts out, and it was so much fun to watch. Like I said, probably one of the greatest games I ever witnessed. Jason Tatum made a crazy three really late to take it within one, and then with 6 seconds left, unbelievable shot by Tatum. Then they had to foul. Norman Powell made both his free throws, and then Marcus Smart had to chuck up a wild shot at the end, and it missed. And the Raptors came out on top, but too bad they couldn't end up winning Game 7. It was just an unbelievable game. All right, now let's move into Brendan's Fortune 4. Basically, I'm going to make 4 picks over the NFL weekend that I think will win somebody a fortune against betting against the spread. So my first pick is the Denver Broncos +3 against Tennessee Titans. I think the Broncos could win this game anyway, even without the help of the 3 points. But the 3 points definitely helps that field goal. So I think that I think it obviously depends on whether or not Cortland Sutton can play. So if he ends up not playing, I would not bet on the Broncos. But if he does, I would, because I think that the Broncos offense could be terrific. And I don't think the Titans will be able to keep up if the Broncos are able to score a ton. And then my next pick is the Colts -8.5. Yes, it's a lot of points to give up. But they're playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, who seem to be giving up every single bit of talent on their roster. So every single facet of the Colts team is better than the Jaguars team. So that's why I think that you can take us 8.5 points. The Colts would still probably win by, double digits. I feel like the final score of this game, in my opinion, just straight up, will be 27-10 maybe or something like that. I can't see the Jaguars making this close. And then my next pick is the Dolphins +7 against the Patriots. That's way too big of a spread for a game that I think is going to be really close, and I think the Dolphins could potentially win anyway. Patriots lost a lot of pieces on defense in the offseason, plus a ton opted out. The Dolphins gained a lot of stuff all over their team. So I just don't think that Cam Newton's going to be enough to have the Patriots win by a full touchdown. I just think it's too big of a spread for a game that's going to be way closer than I think a lot of people think. And then my final pick, which is probably the one I'm least confident in. The Colts one is pretty risky, but this one is even more risky. Is the Bears +2.5. The reason why I think this is very risky is because 2.5 is you're just right. It's so close to 3. 3. If it was 3, this would be like an easy pick for me. But +2.5 is tough because the Bears have to they have to win or lose by like a safety or something. It just normally like a field goal, just a field goal deficit, is a lot easier to pick, but we'll see. I still think the Bears could win this game. I think the Bears will win this game. I think the Jaguars the Lions are going to be one of the worst teams in the league this year. They were 3-12-1 last year, and the Bears were 8-8. And honestly, the Bears added some good stuff in the offseason to help Mitch Trubisky out. They lost Trey Burton, but they drafted Cole Kmet, who I think is going to be a stud tight end. They also signed wide receiver Ted Ginn Jr. So they're helping out Mitch Trubisky enough that I think they could win this game against one of the worst teams in the league, in my opinion, the Detroit Lions.
Moving on to our final segment of the episode, which is question of the episode. We will be talking about who our updated NBA Finals pick is. So who do we think is going to make the NBA Finals this season? And I guess I'll start it off. You kind of covered it earlier on, and I think you pretty much summed it all up. But I have the Lakers versus the Celtics. The Celtics have been playing amazing. The Lakers have been playing amazing. Tonight, I'm expecting them to win Game 5 against the Rockets, sending them home. And, Nuggets versus Clippers, that's still going on, but I still think the Clippers are going to beat them. So I think it's going to be the battle for LA in the Western Conference Finals. And that's going to be a really good matchup. But I think LA is going to take it probably in 6 or 7 games. And then I think it's going to be one of the most classic, if it is the Celtics versus Lakers, it's going to be an instant classic. Lakers-Celtics rivalry has always been a thing. Both teams are the most championships in NBA history. And like you said, the Lakers are 1 away. So I believe you said tie it up if the Lakers win this year. And I think that's going to be an instant classic. It's going to be an amazing series to watch if it happens. And I think that's the most likely thing to happen.
Yeah, my pick, Lakers beat the Celtics in 7. I just think that's the one I want to see the most, really. There's not much. I'm not going to really go with a bunch of evidence here, just what I'm going to be rooting for. So I'm just going to pick with that, I think the Lakers, I had the Lakers. beating the Clippers and advancing to the finals against the Bucks, and the Bucks winning in 7 originally, and now I think the Lakers beat the Celtics in 7. So far, if the Lakers and Clippers both do advance to the Western Conference Finals, so you would have been 3 for 4 in your conference finals picks. You got the Celtics, Lakers, and Clippers right if the Lakers and Clippers advance, and almost got the Bucks. And then I would have been 2 for 4. I picked the Raptors to beat the Celtics. But yeah, I just think that the Celtics are going to end up being the Heat, and the Lakers Clippers one is going to be close. But I think the Lakers will bring a championship to LA. I think that this year they do it in honor of the Mamba. I just think it's just hard. It's just gonna be hard to beat them. They're gonna be so motivated. I feel like to win. I feel like hopefully LeBron can get them motivated. Hopefully, if he can get them motivated to play their hearts out every minute of every game, then I think that they will win the NBA Finals.
That's going to wrap up today's episode. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Make sure to check out our podcast on Podbean if you're watching on YouTube, or check it out on YouTube if you're listening through Podbean. And be on the lookout for future episodes. We upload every Friday or Saturday, depending on how it goes. And we'll be uploading the news every week, so you will be in the loop with all the sports news in the world. Thank you for watching.
Bye-bye.